Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink program. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. This week, we whip out jars and bottles for an episode entirely dedicated to condiments. First up, we sit down with the authority on the subject, author Claire Dinhut, also known as Condiment Claire.
So I did a little Google search. I was like, no one's tapped into just focusing on sauces or spices or dips. And just by researching condiments more, I realized how special they were, just in terms of differentiating different cultures and differentiating different pantries and kitchens in general. And you can learn so much about people and places.
Also on the program, we sample some spicy chili oil in Seattle.
We loved it over grilled prawns. We would make a really great roasted Dungeness crab dish with chili crisp all over it. And as we were creating new batches, things that we were really going after was the crunch factor.
Plus, we're in Ireland for a splash of cider vinegar. All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. In the world of cooking, condiments are too often considered just an extra bit of niceness or naughtiness that can accompany a meal. But rather than an afterthought, they are often actually integral to iconic dishes worldwide as we know them. Also, people are notoriously fiercely partisan on which their favourite sauce or spread is. Be it ketchup or mayonnaise, ponzu or piccalilli, condiments can elicit passionate debates and are often responsible for packing a punch when it comes to a recipe's flavour. Claire Dinhut is someone who has an outsized interest for this culinary niche, so much so that she has become known on the internet as Condiment Claire. Now she has written her first cookbook. Appropriately named The Condiment Book, this is primarily a playful guide encouraging people to get creative with flavour pairings. Claire joined me in the studio to talk more about the book and why loving condiments is as much about cheerful experimentation as it is about the science of taste. I started off by asking her where she got her moniker from.
So the funny thing is when I started on social media, my username was actually Claire from Where. And it was a lot of travel content, like food and travel content, of course, but it was during lockdown. When lockdown lifted and I started getting recognized on the street, people would always say, "You're the condiment girl, you're Condiment Claire, oh my God, you love Dijon mustard." And I was like, the fact that that's what people are remembering from my content that has to do with travel and has to do with different cuisine from around the world, I was like, I guess I'm the condiment girl. I guess I am Condiment Claire. And so I did a little Google search. I was like, no one's tapped into just focusing on sauces or spices or dips. And just by researching condiments more, I realized how special they were, just in terms of differentiating different cultures and differentiating different pantries and kitchens in general. And you can learn so much about people and places that I was like, I would love to dedicate my life to condiments.
See, I think this is really interesting because in the book you say, no niche is too niche. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you also say, condiments are not necessary from the point of view of nutritional value, mm-hmm. but they are what makes a cuisine. So you're looking at something that appears very niche, but actually is practically the essence of food, because otherwise you'd just be having bland chicken every day.
Exactly. And I love to use the chicken example because it's every culture can make a chicken. Let's say every culture can make a sort of roast chicken, but it's what you put on it that's so specific to each place and also so specific to each household. Like, what did your mom put on it when she was serving it to you? Why is it that you love X, Y, or Z condiment? It's because you've had a certain memory associated with it, whether it's cultural or familial. So I think that's what makes condiments so special.
What is your familiar association then? Where does your love of condiments come from in terms of geographic and family roots?
My father's French, my mom is Greek, so I grew up in a very condiment-heavy household. Mm-hmm. Something I did not realize was that strange until people recognized the fact that I was the condiment girl. So I will put Dijon mustard on absolutely everything that it should be on-ish.
Bakewell tart.
No. But I think condiments, as we were saying before, they're not necessary, but they add flavor. And I think for me, when I add Dijon mustard to something, it tastes like my childhood. It tastes like, okay, let's say my mom was out of town, my dad was making something for me. Even if he overcooked it or did anything, he just put a ton of Dijon on there and it would taste great. So it's a flavor associated with comfort. And I think I've lived in so many different places, and whether I was at university or whether I just moved to London or if I was living in Prague or Florence or Rome, whenever I have that Dijon mustard with me, I'm just transported back to comfort. And I think that that's something that only a condiment can do. And the fact that you can do that through a little jar that you can either buy at a shop or put in your suitcase it's really nice. It's like a stuffed animal that you have with you at all times, but through your taste buds, which is, amazing, obviously.
Well, I'm Italian, and I think that Italy does have some amazing condiments, but at the same time, it's probably not as heavy on them as many other cuisines. I remember first coming into this country, to the UK, and kind of discovering the world of dressings.
Yeah.
Because in my life, it had only ever just been olive oil, salt, that's it, leave it. So, in your opinion, if you had to just pick the one country where to live your condiment life in, which country would you pick?
Japan.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the way I'm giddy just answering this question, I love Japanese cuisine. I love Japanese food. I think the fermentation that takes place in a lot of condiments that they have there is so special because it takes you through a journey with every bite. Like you taste something different, or at the beginning of the bite, you taste something and the aftertaste is completely different. I love soy sauce, bonito flakes, ponzu. Every furikake, the sesame seed and seaweed blend, is different. You can have some with fermented plum. You can have some with dried shrimp. And it takes you on a flavor adventure. Something as simple as a block of silken tofu can be leveled up with, hundreds if not thousands of condiments. But you're right, Italy is actually one of the few countries that whenever I go, I'm always surprised by the fact that it's so simple. I don't actually need a condiment for this. I don't feel the need to put something on it. But just like pepperoncini flakes you only need that condiment realistically.
Well, exactly. I think your book also takes us on a proper journey around the world. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting because it reminds us that things that we think are standardized aren't really that standardized at all. The book opens, obviously, with a section on ketchup, which I think is the condiment that comes to mind as an icon for most people when they think about it.
Yeah.
But I suppose, how much international variation have you found in all of these things that you also call the classics?
I found just writing the book, I ended up learning so much. And I think that that's why I loved the experience of writing the book is I'm the first person to say, I'm not a chef. I know how to make certain condiments at home. Use my simple recipes if you want. Otherwise, buy them at the store, create the variations. But what was so fun about writing the book is, okay, maybe I knew why mayonnaise was called mayonnaise, but what year did that happen and why? Were certain condiments born out of necessity or was it just for flavor? And being able to really dive into each condiment, into the history of each condiment to write a book was, so exciting. So I think, for example, ketchup. I knew the brief history of ketchup and Heinz and how iconic he was in terms of creating that condiment, but how the condiment is also used around the world was something I did not realize. So it started off as mushroom ketchup, so no tomato at all. Went through this whole journey, which we could talk about for 30 minutes. But nowadays, for example, in Canada, they have this cake that's very popular, which I had no idea about before writing the book, called ketchup cake, where they put a whole jar of ketchup in this cake and it's bright red. So it's almost like a red velvet cake, but to them it's just ketchup cake. And just learning something like that, I think, is super fun because not only are the uses for each condiment different around the world, they also are used in different preparations, let's say, whether it's like an appetizer, an entree, or even a dessert.
I find it really interesting that you obviously say that the book is not a recipe book, but it's your flavor guide. Mm-hmm. In a way, actually, I think that learning about how to make the best possible flavor combination is kind of the crux of cooking, really. There is technique, but that skill is something that people may think is something that's inbuilt in a kind of a creative genius of a chef, but you can learn it. Do you think you can learn it? Did you learn flavor combination and kind of the art of putting flavor together?
I think learning it is really just trial and error because I think everyone does have different taste buds. So my goal for this book is for people to not even end up using my recipes. Use them once, see how to do it basically. Even for a jam, whether it's a sugar and fruit ratio, try it out. If you think it's too sweet, then just try it again with a little less sugar. If you think it's not sweet enough, try it again with more sugar. And just understand the basic recipe, the basic what to do, and then go off on your own adventure. And I will always give flavor pairing variations and fun ideas. For example, I love putting soy sauce on my vanilla ice cream. It's my absolute favorite combination.
I think that's so funny how these kind of wacky combinations have become more and more popular, right? And condiments do allow you to go a bit crazy sometimes in that direction.
Yeah. No, and I think I just would love for people to explore more in their kitchen. Because guess what? If you put a condiment on something and you don't think it tastes good, great, try again. It's not the end of the world. It's not serious. Condiments are not serious. And I think in certain kitchens, a lot of people are afraid to try new variations because what if it doesn't work? It doesn't matter. Like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it does work, then you've discovered a new flavor pairing, which I think is super fun. And for example, watermelon and ponzu. Guess what? One day I had ponzu on my plate and I was like, well, I want some dessert that has some watermelon in it. So I cut some watermelon. I was like, I'm not going to wash a new plate. I'm lazy. Put it on. Now I put ponzu on my watermelon. So little things like that. It's just, it keeps every meal more exciting.
It's basically an origin story like the first bread ever made, the first watermelon and ponzu ever
Watermelon
made.
ponzu.
No, but there is a sense of real playfulness and kind of childlike excitement also to the world of condiments. Like, it's funny, right? Some of them feel very serious and very grown up, like mustard. And some other condiments feel very childlike, like ketchup.
Yeah.
Then also mustard can bring up a lot of memories of childhood. Where do you think condiments sit on the kind of age scale, and do they feel like child play sometime?
I think it depends on the condiment as well. So for example, mustard, there's so many different types of mustard, and I like that there's a different mustard for every time and place. If I'm at a barbecue, I'm not going to have Dijon mustard. I will have American yellow mustard because it ties in with the nostalgia. I do feel like a kid, or I feel like, okay, I'm on the streets of New York with my mom growing up. It's freezing cold outside. We're getting a warm pretzel at a stall for $1, and there's yellow mustard all over that. That I love. But I also love the idea of like, okay, being at a really nice restaurant and ordering a side of Dijon, and maybe it's like this beautiful Dijon mustard coming in a little ceramic plate, and you feel so adult. So I think each condiment has its own levels of child to adult. But at the same time, I don't think that any condiment should be put in that box necessarily. So for example, the first time I ever had solid food, I was sitting on my mom's lap. I was a few months old, however old I was, and my parents were having a conversation with my godparents, etc., etc. People then looked at me and they're like, oh, please look at your child, because I was grabbing garlic anchovies off of my mom's plate and stuffing them in my face. So I think it also depends on just not being afraid to try pungent flavors or new flavors that maybe feel foreign to you because they're not from your culture. And I think that's what condiments are. They allow you to really travel the globe and try different spices and textures and flavors that maybe you didn't grow up with in your culture. And it's so easy to do so through a jar.
I think that's really true. The fact that they can be an introduction to a new cuisine, because sauces have become such a huge part of the way that people shop. It's very accessible at supermarket, for example, and it feels less daunting than trying out a whole new different cuisine, but you can have it bottled up like that. How much travel did you do in order to discover new things as well? Has this passion also led you to go places that you didn't think you would want to go, but you'd go there specifically for the purpose of trying a condiment that you've had in your head for a long time?
Yeah, I think the special thing with condiments is you can travel from the comfort of your own home. I think a lot of the new condiments that I tried, especially when moving to London during lockdown, was because of supermarkets, and you couldn't travel anywhere. You couldn't go to restaurants. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try the spicy mango chutney that maybe I hadn't tried before. I'm going to try Mrs. Ball's chutney, which is from South Africa. I'm going to try all of these new things. And it's accessible because it's quite affordable. Even if you need to save up £5 in the span of a few weeks just to buy this jar, once you have the jar, you can play around in your kitchen and try different recipes from that culture. And that's all thanks to this condiment. But once I do find condiments that I really like, I'm so lucky that now condiments are my job, which is, it's so fun to answer one, like, what do you do for a living? And I say condiments. But I went to Japan earlier this year because I really wanted to learn more about wasabi. And one of my days, I took a 3.5-hour train to go to this random little town in the foothills by these mountains by Tokyo to learn about wasabi and to go wasabi farming and learn about all the different variations and try it fresh firsthand. I was in Wales earlier this year at in Anglesey, so Holland Mon, which is Anglesey sea salt, because I love their sea salt flakes. Learned about the whole process there, learned about what differentiates their salts to other salts. So I think figure out what condiments you like, and then when you go on a trip, try and learn more about it firsthand. Not just buying it at the store, but also like going to the people who are making it, who are boots on the ground, because then you get to appreciate the condiment even more because you learn more about its history and the people who are helping you access it from a different place.
Claire Dinhut there, speaking to me at Midori House. If you browse the condiment aisle in an Asian specialty store, and increasingly at mainstream grocers worldwide, prepare to be dazzled by the array of chili oils on offer. Often a staple of Chinese cuisine as well as other culinary traditions around the continent, these jars are filled with fried chili pepper and aromatics infused in oil. Other than a variety of mainstay brands from Laogan and SMB, there's now a new wave of small batch upstarts joining in. Seattle's KariKari Chilli Crisp is one of them. Founders Ruby Sparks and Rob Grissett started their brand in 2020 out of their Capitol Hill apartment, but their crunchy, garlicky recipe is only gaining in popularity. So what's behind this global chili crisp craze? Monocle's Seattle correspondent Gregory Scruggs visited the pair to find out more.
My name is Ruby Sparks.
And I'm Robert Grissett.
And we are KariKari, and we make a wonderful garlic chili crisp.
How did you become acquainted with chili crisp as a condiment? Was it a food experience from travel? Where and how did chili crisp enter your life?
So I come from a multicultural household. I'm half Japanese and African American, half Irish Italian. So I had a lot of various influences growing up, and the food I grew up with is definitely influenced by all of that. Rob actually comes from the food industry. He's been in food for his entire working life, and we both came to our partnership liking chili crisp, and we got into making it. We started bringing it on dishes to family and friend gatherings and things like that. And we would get lots of positive feedback. And so we would make it more and more. And we got interested in what would our perfect chili crisp be. We were making batch after batch of chili crisp, tweaking things all along the way, making incremental switches around. And things that we served it with at that time to family and friends, we loved it over grilled prawns. We would make a really great roasted Dungeness crab dish with chili crisp all over it, and so on and so forth. And as we were creating new batches, things that we were really going after was the crunch factor. How can we have the most and kind of layered crunch experience? We were also going after layers of flavor. And we were also going for an evolved bite, so meaning that the notes change throughout the bite.
What can you tweak to create that effect that you are going for?
A chili crisp at a base level is just a chili oil-based condiment with crunchy elements in it. And there's a lot of variation within that. But something really unique about chili crisp is that it adds both flavor and texture in one go, which is what we really love about it because we both very much enjoy texture in food. Something that you can tweak is like your chilies, for instance. We spent a lot of time thinking about our layers of flavor, and that's definitely reflected in our chilies. And Rob can speak more on that.
So we spent a long time researching and tasting varieties of chilies. There's a unique attribute to every kind of chili. Some are sweet, some are raisiny, some are smoky, some are like hyper spicy. And so we were combining and tasting different combinations of them to really create a bouquet of flavors that was balanced so that one chili just didn't knock you out. It was this just kind of experience with chilies. And it took us a long time. We tasted over 20 different varieties of chilies to kind of create this balance and harmony of chilies.
There seems to be a real taste for chili crisp as a condiment these days. Can you describe a little bit riding that wave? Was that something you saw coming? Did you think chili crisp was going to be kind of the next it condiment, if you will? How do you fit into that food trend cycle?
What's really unique about chili crisp, again, is that it adds flavor and texture. And so we really value that. We weren't necessarily thinking in we should make this because we think it's going to be a trend. But we're also not surprised that it is a trend because it is so flavorful and so much texture in one bite.
Well, let's taste some chili crisp.
One thing about our product that many people notice right away is the big slices of crispy golden fried garlic. I'd say that's the top thing people notice. And that's one of the things that we really wanted because it provides a really pleasing crunch. Of course, it's not just the garlic. We also have crispy fried peanuts, shallots. So it's all that layered crunch experience. You want to?
Oh, yeah.
And You always want to make sure that you stir your chili crisp from the bottom because all chili crisp will settle out. There's different sediment layers. And so you want to stir any chili crisp from the bottom so you get the perfect scoop.
Yeah, that's why we have on the label, stir from the bottom. Yeah, you've got the salts and the sugars and the tamaris that sink to the bottom. And without that stirring, you're not going to get the perfect bite. But you can hear it's so crunchy. And this is what makes food delicious, is texture.
All right, here goes nothing. Chili crisp for breakfast. Very crunchy. Crunchy like a cereal would be crunchy. Mm-hmm. Oh, the garlic and shallot hits almost simultaneously with the chili. And since it's oily, it goes down really smooth. And then on the back, is there a little bit of maybe like almost a Szechuan numbing peppercorn? Yep. But subtle, not taking over the whole palate like when you're eating certain Szechuan dishes. That was very tasty. I could see myself going through a lot of chili crisp on the right dish.
Yeah.
I've even heard that some people are using the chili crisp in not just savory Asian foods, but even like sweet dishes, desserts. Can you tell me about some of the more unexpected applications of chili crisp?
Yeah. So a really easy one that anybody can do is taking some nice vanilla ice cream and putting chili crisp directly on top. So you're getting that salty, sweet, savory combination. It's super excellent and accessible.
So chili crisp, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert, it seems. That's the KariKari way.
Thank you, Greg. You're listening to The Menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Sana Jimani.
An exhibition of hyper-realistic food models is now open at Japan House, London. The first UK exhibit of its kind, titled Looks Delicious, Exploring Japan's Food Replica Culture, showcases Japan's history of food replicas dating back to 1923. The models, originally intended for restaurants who want to advertise these versions of their dishes to diners, now give London audiences insight into this long-standing craft. A British woman has been honoured for boosting ties between the UK and Japan through marmalade. Jane Hassel-McCosh, who runs the Dalmain World Marmalade Awards in Cumbria, was praised by Japan's government for welcoming Japanese visitors and supporting a marmalade festival in the country. And finally, Spain's olive oil sector is bouncing back. Improved weather conditions this year has increased production, and consumers are hopeful that prices of the foodstuff will ease up and costs will stabilise. Prolonged heat waves and droughts have severely impacted Spanish olive yields over the past 2 summers, leading to an almost 60% decline in output last year and soaring prices. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now, back to Chiara.
Thanks, Sana. You're listening to The Menu. Now we're off to Ireland, where the country's abundance of apple trees has made this the perfect place to produce cider vinegar. The pungent condiment is a staple that has been shaping people's meals for centuries, but it wasn't always produced through organic methods. When husband and wife Rod and Julia Calder-Potts took over Highbank Orchard Farm in County Kilkenny from Rod's parents, they decided to go chemical-free, but it wasn't an easy change to make. They didn't expect they'd have to burn all of the farm's 32,000 apple trees and start again. But the process was worth it. Now Highbank Orchard produces award-winning apple products such as cider, spirits, syrups, and of course, cider vinegar. As people's interest in this classic condiment continues to grow, also thanks to a newfound appreciation for its health benefits, Monocle's Sebastian Stephenson took a tour with Rod to learn how this orchard has managed to produce such a fruitful return.
This is the orchard here, and the apples are grown on a dwarfing rootstock. We have about 6,000 trees. Interesting now, these first rows, these rows are about a quarter of a mile long. You remember I told you about the Shumai Buddhists who had adopted the orchard. They came here. I asked them if there was anything I was doing that they didn't like. And they said, yeah, they didn't like the idea of me feeding the trees, of actually putting manure down. Could you believe it? And I told them I felt that they were completely wrong, that they were going over the top with this completely, that if you take a crop out of a field, you've got to replace it with something. And they said, no, they said, that's not how nature works. You know, you've got the Amazon out there, you don't see big truckloads of stuff going out and dumping in the Amazon. The Amazon just keeps working like a well-oiled machine. So I said, okay, we'll give you a trial, but I'm sure you're going to be wrong. But there are 6 rows here, quarter of a mile long rows. That's about 1.5 miles of trees. I said, I won't put any manure on them, and we'll see what happens. Spectacular. Within 2 years, I rang Hirohito up, who was one of the Buddhist monks, and I said, Hiro, you're going to have to stop praying for the trees. I said, the branches are breaking. And pray for the Irish rugby team. We need help. And it's true. And basically interfering with nature by putting manure on. You know, when I started this journey, I knew nothing. I thought I knew a lot about it, 40 years ago. But I have learned very slowly that the best thing to do is to leave nature at it,
So what brought the Shumai monks to an orchard farm in the middle of Ireland? Since 1979, Rod Calder-Potts took over the orchard farm that we are in, which his parents set up in 1969. They had followed in the then modern approach to farming of spraying pesticides to control and create a predictive crop of apples each year. However, Rod's parents knew and said to him at the time that this approach was damaging the very land that created the bounty. With his wife Julia in 1986, they decided to stop using the pesticides. They would let the orchards grow the apples organically. This process of allowing the apples grow with as little involvement as possible would take 30 years to fully return to a productive crop. The monks were interested in an approach to farming they call natural agriculture, and that's how the monks and Rod encountered each other. However, for Julia and Rod, there was another reason for why they decided to go cold turkey on pesticides. As Rod recalls to me when we spoke earlier in their house on the farm.
The reason we gave up chemicals is because we were worried about living with them. We had very young children. This farm was being sprayed sometimes 2 or 3 times a week with these very, very powerful chemicals. So powerful that, you'd only need to spray a pint an acre with some of these chemicals in order to achieve the effect you wanted, which was effectively to kill things. And we just didn't want to live with this. We decided that we'd stay on the farm and we'd probably suffer financially for it because we're going into the unknown. So we set up a couple of other businesses that we lived off, but we didn't expect anything. So we could be financially independent to make this rather drastic move agriculturally, which is something that very few people have done, is to completely reject chemicals. And it was the unknown. The farm now is, I'd say, pretty nearly perfect. It's incredibly robust and resilient, and I'm sure when you drove in here you could just feel the energy that's coming from the farm, whereas, as I say, it was like a desert in the early 80s until we rejected chemicals completely. A lot of people ask me, why did we start processing this stuff ourselves? Most farmers are happy enough to just sell it to a processor. And the reason was necessity. In 2008, the Lehman's crisis and the financial collapse, particularly here in Ireland, meant that the businesses that we were kind of depending upon collapsed completely. And we had 6 people working for us, and we had pretty well no income. So Julie, who is the tough guy in this relationship, Julie sort of said to me, well, Rod, you keep telling me that these apples are so special. Now, why don't we exploit that? Why don't we process them and offer them to people? I'm sure there'll be people who'd be interested in buying such a pure product as we are growing. And she started then looking at possibilities of processing the apples. First of all, she looked at baby food. A lot of mothers will insist on baby food. Organic baby food is a big thing. But as she looked at the possibility for baby's food, she discovered more and more options and more possibilities. So from baby food we went to apple juice, and then by pure accident we left some juice lying around. When we found it, we discovered it was very nice cider, so we started doing cider. And then we started distilling the cider, and then we left some cider lying around and discovered it was wonderful. Vinegar, then we started exploiting that, and we discovered there was a huge demand for vinegar. So now, thanks to Julie's tenacity, we have about 18 different products that we make from the apple. But the most important one, and the thing that there's the biggest demand for, is our apple cider vinegar. One of the reasons is, and when you listen to talk about vinegar, there's often a reference to the mother. Is the mother there? And you'd probably be interested to what the mother is. And the mother is actually these very same microbes that are out in the orchard that actually cause the vinegar. What vinegar is, basically, is apple juice, which has been fermented by a yeast and then been rotted by a bacteria. The bacteria is called an acetobacter, and the acetobacter basically takes the alcohol after it's been fermented into cider. It takes the alcohol and puts an oxygen molecule in with the cider, and that is enough to turn it into acetic acid. Basically, vinegar is fully fermented or rotted apple juice. But the important thing is that the microbes that are in it are the very same microbes that are out in a healthy orchard like ours, an orchard that hasn't been sprayed. As I say, pretty well every commercial orchard is sprayed. I've yet to find a commercial orchard like us, another orchardist like us, who doesn't use any chemicals at all. If they use any chemicals, it disturbs this microbial biome, and hence at the end of the day, the vinegar isn't right. Because why do you want the vinegar? Basically, those microbes that are in the orchard and in the vinegar are the very same microbes, or consist of the very same microbes that are in your stomach. The biology of your stomach, basically you could say the invaders of your stomach, those bacteria in your stomach, they're the very same bacteria that are in the vinegar.
We've moved over from the house into the on-site shop.
These are our balsamic vinegars. Yeah, okay, that's our ordinary vinegar. That's the stuff we sell most of. It's basically just simple, just rotten apple juice.
Well, and then is it possible to actually get a little taste of this?
Yes.
And maybe even describe, as I'm tasting it, what it is like?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get a... This is rosemary infused cider. Now, it's very strong, so... Really, to enjoy it, you want to dilute it back. If you're actually just drinking it, I reckon you dilute it back to, a tablespoonful to a pint even. Gives a lovely flavour. You really can enjoy the flavour.
So yeah, you've given me, I think, about a tablespoon. You probably say by eye.
Say with a pint of water, it'll be.
I mean, it's...
If you drink it neat, you want to be careful because it's 5% acid. So you can burn yourself. You can actually do yourself harm if you were to stick it up your nose or cough or something like that.
Well, in the interest of journalism, I am taking that risk. Well, obviously being a vinegar, it is definitely strong. You can definitely feel it kind of jumping over in the back of your mouth. But what's amazing in terms of the aroma is it's obviously a very strong kind of appley taste, but without the sweetness. So you're getting this very kind of rich taste, as I would describe it.
What's interesting as well about it, if you look at it, you see the colour. All my stuff is very dark. Most of you go to health food shops and buy a cider vinegar. They're very light colour. And the reason ours are so dark is they're made from cider apple. And what differentiates cider apples from eating apples is that they're quite bitter. That bitterness, it's like the effect that hops has on beer. That's the effect that they're called polyphenols have on cider. They give it greater depth and everything like that. And most vinegars are made from just C-grade apples, reject apples, eating apples. These are made from cider apples, so they have this high phenolic content, so they've got a lot more depth to the flavour. And they're also, the polyphenols are very good for you.
Sebastian Stephenson there. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show, Food Neighborhoods, for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This programme was produced by Monica Lillis, and our sound engineers were Mariella Bevan, Flynn Simons and Elio Greenfield. Thanks for listening, and until next week.
When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some of us more confident than others? Financial Times readers think fearlessly because they're supported by bold and trusted journalism. Start reading today and bring well-informed ideas to the table. From the latest on the pleasures of food to sustainable farming and the future of wine. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.